Just as families pass hereditary diseases on, so do cultures. We are a descendant of the Roman Republic here in our United States of America. And as we contemplate the devolution of the American electorate, which is the real cause of our problems, we should look carefully at how Romans gave up their freedom willingly, joyously even. The Roman Republic was growing, but it had a natural enemy, the city of Carthage, across the Mediterranean Sea. And in two great Punic Wars, Rome and Carthage struggled, much as we did in our world wars against Germany. In the end, Rome triumphs over Hannibal. The Third Punic War is an afterthought. In the end, Marcus Porcius Cato, the censor, his constant epigram, his constant epilogue to all of his political speeches, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, was finally made a reality. The city was destroyed, the soil was sown with salt, and a new Roman city of Carthage was built just down the coast. Without Carthage to keep Rome honest, the purpose of the Roman Republic became less about survival and more about imagining what it might be. It grew directionless, restive, and luxury-loving. Not that there's anything wrong with luxury. As the victories of Rome after the Punic Wars amassed multitudes of slaves, it became harder and harder for free Roman men to find jobs. Latifundia, massive plantations, replaced the family farm. Slaves replaced free men who were employees or who were craftsmen. And more, the free citizens of Rome had to depend upon their patrons, the wealthy, the well-connected, the powerful, to support them on a dole. In the end, these patrons and their slavish clients, whose only job was to do what the patrons said, to vote the way they told them to, brought about the end of the Republic, because the patrons decided that the Senate and people of Rome would be best ruled by me, and I will make of my clients a private army. Imagine Bill Gates with a bomber wing. Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Crassus, Caesar, Antony, and Augustus all fought a century-long civil war over who would be the ruler of the Roman Republic. And by the time the civil wars were over, the Roman people cheered. They were grateful because Augustus not only brought peace and prosperity, he would personally feed the people of Rome from his new private province, Egypt. He would provide the bread and circuses that the idle poor needed. He would be Big Daddy government. The Roman people who were recipients of this became his and his successors' permanent clients. The emperor controlled the army, and the emperor controlled the mob, and with both he controlled the Senate and people of Rome. And the Romans were grateful. To salve their egos, Augustus kept the forms of the Republic. He was merely first citizen, first among equals. The Romans were still free. They still had their elections. They still had their Senate. They still elected consuls, and Augustus wasn't even consul most of the time. Augustus ruled despite the system. The system became a caricature, a sham of freedom, an exercise in the dead rituals of a free people long after the freedom had passed. Successive Roman emperors got rid of even these pretenses of freedom, establishing a totalitarian police state. So now we come to today. The American people had Germany and the Soviet Union to struggle with in 2 world wars and a Cold War, and the Soviets have been gone for over 30 years. And we have lost ourselves in utopian questions that have no answers. What is America about? Is it about providing the greatest equality of opportunity, the most prosperity, and the most freedom? Or is it about being able to decide your gender? Or is it about claiming that certain people, because of their race, have privilege and other people deserve reparations? What is this utopia that we are trying to build here in the United States? It's unclear. We're divided. But we cannot even have the discussion so long as massive numbers of Americans receive federal welfare. There is a direct conflict of interest between a person on the dole who gets to vote for people who will increase what the dole means and their civic responsibilities. An individual citizen who is dependent upon a certain political party to provide government benefits ad infinitum is not a citizen who's going to be voting thoughtfully. They won't hold their leaders to account. They'll have leaders like Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who arrogantly and arbitrarily abused her citizens throughout the COVID crisis. A woman like that should not have gotten anywhere near re-election. But she was reelected by people who depended upon big mommy government in her case. Were I ruler, I would strip anyone who was currently or recently receiving benefits from our welfare system, from the voter rolls, for the duration of their dependency. If they are not going to act like adults, if desperation or laziness or both is going to infantilize them and make them into latter-day teenagers, then they should have all the voting rights of somebody under the age of 18, which is none. Of course, that would be lampooned as racist, sexist, homophobe, elitist, classist, and everything else-ist, because you can't have an honest dialogue with Democrats when it comes to padding the voter rolls with dependent welfare slaves. But let's assume that my grand idea of restricting the franchise to independent adults is impossible, and I admit it is. The only answer is a moral revival where you remind people that they are more than simply their belly interests, that there is dignity in work, that there is pride that you can get by pursuing your dreams independently, that there is a certain thing about adulthood that cannot be experienced unless you make your own way in the world, that freedom requires the bravery and the grit and the common sense and the dedication that being an adult involves, and that you cannot be free if you abandon those difficulties in return for being cared for like an invalid. People who are mentally or physically disabled, especially those who became that way in service to our country, they deserve to be taken care of. But able-bodied adults of sound mind should work and should not be supported. The de-Christianization of America made possible the degradation of the average American on welfare, the replacement of their pride in themselves with their acceptance of their own perpetual dependency. The answer, the real answer, I think, to the problem with our declining, decaying, and devolving American republic is to revive morality, not the censorious fundamentalist morality that is about deciding who goes to heaven and hell here on this earth, but the notion that we are more than our bodies, that our lives are about more than just living one more day, and that our purposes in this world can be genuinely and truly noble if we are brave enough to meet them head on. What we need is a moral great awakening, a new revival of the sense of human dignity that is not granted by some nabob, but that is seized by each individual self-supporting adult.